Hello, everybody. Good evening. Welcome back to my show with Grand Boulevard Coalition. And my name is Cynthia. So we'll be starting our show today. Our topic for today is going to be discussing community violence awareness and safety. Just kind of to learn a little statistics, who it's affecting, why it's affecting these populations, and also just ways to stay safe. Whether you're an adult or youth, community violence affects everybody. So it's really important to just have that conversation so that everybody's aware and learning about these things. But a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Just to recap, last week on Friday, Chicago Area Project hosted a online workshop on World AIDS Day, and that was December 1st. So we had a workshop with some youth, some parents, and members of the community, staff, just to talk about World AIDS Day, what that means, and some stats on that too, just to kind of have that discussion with youth. We feel like is really important because youth can be at risk if they're not aware of the safety precautions of practicing or abstaining from certain risky behaviors. Um, and yeah, so I felt like it went really well, and I just wanted to give a special shout out to Miss Kathleen, Lakita, and Mariah, who was one of our speakers during that presentation. She gave a great talk about the different forms of treatment, which honestly I feel like I've learned something every time I've done the workshop. We do it every year on World AIDS Day, and Mariah has spoken a lot about even new treatments for people with HIV, which has been really interesting. So, if that is something that you're interested in learning more about, join our social medias, look us up. Chicago Area Project to look up any future workshops that we may have. Sadly, that one wasn't recorded, but we will definitely have more in the future. As my program, Healthy Living Our Number One Goal, focuses on HIV/AIDS awareness as well as substance use and misuse prevention information. But yeah, so we'll get into the topic for today, which is community awareness, community violence awareness. And so, talking a little bit what that means and what that is, more specifically, getting into some examples of community violence that can include assaults, fights between like large groups or gangs. That can be school shootings or even just shootings in any public areas, malls, and things like that. I'm sure we see a lot of this in the news throughout the country and also more specifically in Chicago. Because of the large population that we do have in the city of Chicago, there's bound to be a lot of violence in these areas too, which are more largely populated. And we're just going to go a little bit into some examples of those things. And I'm sure some of you see things on the news about shootings that may have happened, fights that may have happened. I know I've heard personally about some fights in different communities throughout Chicago near South Shore, even places like the Loop. So I feel like what we want to just make aware to people is that even though like the quote unquote nicer areas are nicer, it doesn't mean that violence doesn't happen in those areas. So whether you're in a better area or not so better area, it's important to just stay aware of your surroundings. For an example, somewhere like Wicker Park, which is a North Side community, there was a something that had happened where a woman who was walking with her suitcase was robbed by some armed men that drove by in a car. This happened like in the nighttime. I think about a week or two back. So it's just important just to be aware of your surroundings. Know when you're being on your phone in certain public places, and things like that. But yeah, so going a little bit into the research, research indicates that youth and young adults aged 10 to 34, particularly those in communities of color, are disproportionately impacted from community violence. And community violence takes lives and leaves a lasting legacy of trauma. So, another big example could be the Uvalde massacre, the school shooting with the elementary school that happened not here but in another state, where that was an example of community violence, and that affects a large population of people that were parents and people who had children that went to that school. So this is something that leaves trauma in these neighborhoods, in these communities, and leaves people in the surrounding communities even scared to trust their schools, trust their governments and their police, because of certain videos that had come out about how things were handled with that situation and other situations. And racially segregated and high poverty neighborhoods are mostly affected by this. And it's important to think about why these neighborhoods are mostly affected by these by community violence, and that can be because there could be a lack of jobs in that area. So people who don't have jobs, who just have a lot of time to, be outside or find other means of making money. If it's difficult for people who have are having trouble to find a job, right? And want to find other means to make money. And also for youth specifically too, right? If kids aren't going to school, they're out in the streets or left unsupervised because their parents may be at work. They may only have a single parent that's trying to make ends meet, and so the youth is left alone at home, trying to find other ways to connect with the community. And there may be gangs in that community or people rolling with the wrong crowd and things like that. So also a lack of after school programs, right? So even kids who are going to school over the summertime, kids are left unsupervised. Parents still have to go to work over the summer. Kids are left with nothing to do. So hanging out with large groups of people, going to places that maybe are not so safe, and ending up just in unsafe situations. So it's not to say that youth are the offenders, but they can also be the victims of community violence. But also important to think about that on both ends, right? So youth are also at risk of being victims of community violence or have even been the offenders. So kind of like I mentioned, it can kind of come from both ends. And that's important to think about as well. And over half of US homicides occurred among the ages of 15 to 34 in 2020. So that was during the pandemic, during COVID, when people were on lockdown, nobody was going to school or work, people had lost their jobs. I might have briefly talked a little bit about this in the last session that I did at Can TV last week, but COVID had really taken a toll on people. People had lost their jobs, so they're kind of struggling to make ends meet. And even youth who have been on their schools have been on lockdown, have been closed because of COVID. So they're kind of stuck at home, nothing to do, and might engage in some risky behaviors, going outside when they're not supposed to be, at later hours or hours whenever their parents are unaware where they are. So things like that. And the University of Chicago Crime Lab recently reported a 50% increase in shooting victimizations of school-aged youth 17 years and younger since 2019. So this is specifically 17-year-olds. So these are not adults. These are really young kids that are still high school aged, who have been a part of that statistic in shooting victimizations. And you kind of hear a lot of stories of maybe like big fights will break out amongst teenagers, and maybe someone takes out a gun that might have belonged to their parents that they're not supposed to have, a gun that maybe they borrowed from a friend because they wanted to protect themselves during a fight that they knew was going to happen. So it's things like that. There was recently something that happened on the news. I believe it was a mall. It wasn't here in Chicago, but it was a fight between two youth, and one of the youth had pulled out a gun and started shooting. And this was something that just recently happened, so I don't know the full details. I do know that they got arrested, but it's just things like that that kind of put other people in danger when they take out a gun in a public space like a mall where there are innocent bystanders present that just put so many more people in danger that don't need to be put in danger, and just kind of thinking about that. So, because there will always be, not always, but there will be situations where innocent bystanders will get hurt if they're not aware of what's happening around them. Um, and just kind of trying to decrease that risk of getting hurt in certain situations. Um, but yeah, so earlier analysis by the crime lab had documented 8% of those arrests were homicides, and 9% for shootings, 32% for robberies, and 49% for carjackings, where youth were 17 years and younger as well. So I don't know if some of you had heard during COVID, that era of time when there was a lockdown, there were a lot of carjackings in different neighborhoods in Chicago where people were stealing car parts, basically. And just like videos of people even learning how to do that really quickly, where you won't even notice until maybe 10 minutes have passed, and they're really like learn to be efficient with that kind of thing. But it's just something that has increased with youth, and just kind of losing that connection with the youth, I feel like has increased that likeliness for them to go outside and participate in risky behaviors. Personally, I've been able to work with some youth in an alternative school, and just like hearing their stories as well about the friends that they have had and the risky situations that their friends have been put in. And a lot of them, I feel like they know that they understand that those are really, risky and bad situations that their friends have been engaging in and participating in. Even some of them will admit to doing some things, but it's kind of showing that they really need a little bit of guidance. If parents are not there, or if they don't have an adult that they can trust or rely on, and just making sure that we offer that support to them, which is the point of that group that we're having, has been really enlightening. But yeah, so learning a little bit more about safety, right? So, what are ways that we can be safe in certain situations? Not to guarantee 100% guarantee anything, but just to kind of increase our awareness and decrease that likelihood of getting harmed or being in harm's way. I learned a little bit of training. Well, when I was doing a training at my university while I was doing my undergrad, I had worked for my university, Northeastern Illinois, and they gave us a training more specifically for schools, just to kind of be aware of school shootings and what to do in certain situations with the lockdown, making sure you check people's IDs when they come into the building. And making sure all doors are locked, because where I worked, it was the gym, and the gym had many doors and ways of access into the building. So making sure that from the outside they're not able to get in, making sure you know where to run, where to hide, and what to grab, so that if you need to fight, you can grab something to protect yourself. So that was definitely something when I had taken that training. It did scare me a little, just kind of the thought of, oh, what if this does happen? Um, but it is a necessary training that we all had to do. And I feel like it really just made me more aware of, this can happen to anyone in any school. So it was really good to know that. But just in more situations in general, not just schools, right? You got to observe your surroundings, whether you're at your high school, whether you're outside in a public area, restaurants, even if you're just like out downtown, at the store, at the park, or at parties too. Noticing when someone is displaying angry or intense demeanor, weird, strange behaviors, um, or wearing heavy clothing that's inappropriate for the weather. So if it's like 80, 90 degrees outside and someone's wearing a thick coat, a big long coat, then that's something that's definitely strange and something to take note of. Also, if you are someone that takes public transport, they kind of put those posters around and advertisements about being aware of people who leave their stuff on the train, whether that be like a mysterious looking suitcase or backpack. Um, and even just being aware of your own things too, so that you don't get robbed. Also, things like not having both of your headphones in when you're going on the train or waiting for the train, because you want to make sure that you can hear things as well. Let's say, for example, if you're at a party, you hear people arguing and it gets really loud. People start to get a little physical. That's when you kind of can see that, oh, the situation's a little unsafe. You might want to make some distance between you and this person or these people. If it starts to get a little too aggressive, if you know the person that's getting in the fight, just trying to grab them and pull them away to calm the situation, separate the people fighting if you feel like it's safe to do so. And also suspicious objects, like I mentioned, such as unattended bag or an unidentified vehicle that doesn't seem to belong, should also be assessed as a potential threat. So maybe if you're in a neighborhood that's a little more like, you know, your neighborhood, you know the people that live around you, you know the cars. I feel like after a while you kind of start to get a sense of whose cars are the regulars and which cars are not. So kind of being aware of, does this car have its plates on in the front and the back? When you notice a car that may not have plates on it and they're driving it, or there's a person in it, just being aware of that, because someone with a car that has no plates can mean that that person is dangerous, or that the car may be stolen. And yeah, so just things like that to be aware of. And also just kind of making sure that if you're out with friends, things like that, you're kind of assessing your area. If you went out to eat, where are you at? Do you know how to get back with your friends? Making sure you have a group text with your friends in case you all get separated. Like, for example, at a concert. There have been some concerts where dangerous things have happened if people kind of start to push and people get squished between each other. Sometimes with the crowds moving a lot, people can get separated. So just making sure that you have a contact at all times. Other things can be, for example, some apps that kind of keep you aware of what's happening in your area, such as Citizen. The Citizen app is one good app. I know there are even like some social media groups that you can join where they kind of share stuff like, oh, this is happening in this area right now. So stay away, or just to be more aware of what's happening in your neighborhood, or maybe if it's nearby somewhere where you work, just having that too, like being aware of where you work and the neighborhood, and just like of any crime that may be going on. And also, there are some other apps that can just like track your location and send it to family and friends. When you take an Uber or Lyft, you're also able to share your location with people so that they know where you're at, and things like that. So, just making sure that you have means to quickly communicate with other people. When you're in danger, you can't really text someone like, "Hey, I need help," or even if you're in a situation where you need to be quiet, you can't call someone. So there are definitely apps that'll immediately send your location to someone that you trust, family or friend. Even on your phone, I think you don't even need to download an app, but there's ways that you can figure out on your phone how to directly send your location to people. So yeah, just make sure that you're aware of all the different ways that you can connect with people through your phone, to let them know that you need help if you're ever in a situation like that. And another thing that I have learned about personally is situational awareness. And so it's kind of what we talked about already, but situational awareness includes three essential actions. So recognition, which is being alerted to something out of the ordinary that could pose a threat, right? So things that don't seem like they belong, people dressed funny, acting strange, things like that. Assessment, analyzing the situation and your response options. So it could be, like I said, you have a friend that's in a fight, or maybe someone wants to fight with you, and just knowing how to de escalate a situation. I feel like that's something that a lot of youth need to learn about, de-escalation, because I feel like a lot of kids tend to respond um, when someone comes to someone and starts, agitating them or becoming, feeling like they're being targeted, they want to fight back automatically as their initial response to defend themselves verbally or get aggressive back at the person. So I feel like learning how to de-escalate a situation. I feel like only one situation I've ever been in while I was working at my university was two people playing basketball in the gym wanted to get into a fight, and I was there with my supervisor. We had to learn how to de-escalate the situation, and we were able to calm them down, kind of separate them and talk to them separately. And there will, just give them those options, give them the consequences. If they choose to fight in here, they'll be banned, they won't be allowed back in. And what they really want to do is play basketball, not to argue with each other. So I feel like we were able to come to an agreement with that. But yeah, so the last thing is response, taking direct action to increase the chance of survival. So there are a lot of safety videos on YouTube, I feel like, for school shootings, even like public shootings, like at a restaurant. There was one video that I had seen about how to stay safe, make sure your first response in a situation is looking for all exits wherever you are. If you're in an enclosed space, looking for all exits, looking for good places to hide, places that are near you, nearby you, or near an exit to hide, or making sure you're able to grab something near you, whether that be like a bottle, a bat, a large stick, like anything that can protect you from the aggressor, are all different ways that you can kind of work to defend yourself if you need to. And some people, will even take up classes, boxing, kickboxing, karate, other forms of ways to kind of just learn how to protect yourself, build a little muscle, and just be able to fight back if you can. But, that has to be, I feel like, your last resort to fight back if there are no other options. But yeah, so just learning about those different things, I feel like will increase your awareness, increase your chances of being left unharmed, leaving unsafe situations, and just sharing any of that information that I shared with you with friends and family will help with just making sure that everyone is okay in a situation, not just you, but your friends and family as well. So just, yeah, I wanted to talk about this just to kind of help increase awareness and to make sure that if you're watching this, you share it with your friends, your family. And yeah, so I think that's about it for my topic. And I will be doing some outreach at LOS and the Family Guidance Center. So if you all are in those areas, feel free to stop by and say hi. But thank you so much for watching me today, and I will see you all next time. Thank you.